så Discorden her oppe da. Vi kan sjekke oss ut der igjen. Hva faen er det her for noen kaos? Sjekke. Sånn, sånn. Da er Discord der. Og da... Der er meg der.
This is Bloomberg Business Week Daily, reporting from the magazine that helps global leaders stay ahead, with insight on the people, companies, and trends shaping today's complex economy, plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week Daily, with Carol Masser and Tim Stenevec, live on Bloomberg Radio, television, YouTube, channels.
What's new?
It is Bloomberg Originals. Emily Graffeo likes our new intro.
When did you guys get that?
What do you think? Last week.
A week ago, I would say.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago.
We got a lot 2 weeks ago. With weeks like this, I don't know. Time is a flat circle, so I have no idea.
I can't believe it's only Monday.
Yeah,
And the market is still open. We still have an hour left.
Folks, I don't know if you were one of them on your team worked all weekend writing this big take. Were you on that?
I actually wasn't on that,
Okay.
but props to them.
Yeah.
I was out of office on Friday, so I missed that.
Well, you missed a lot.
But they did a great job. I did miss a lot, and this has been a rude awakening, trying to catch up to what has happened.
Well,
in
Eric
markets.
Wiener's in the house. He's going to tell us in just a few minutes everything that is going on with today's trade, because it is a volatile one. He's going to be joining us in a couple of minutes. The voice you just heard is Emily Graffeo.
Halla, boys and girls!
And she is here for the next 2 hours. Carol Masser is out this afternoon. We got a big program coming up. We're, of course, talking about the markets top of mind on a volatile day such as this. In addition to that, we got the big take coming up. Wall Street is just collateral damage when it comes to Trump's trade war. And then a little later in the program, we are going to hear from Senator Elizabeth Warren. She is speaking to Bloomberg TV exclusively on everything trade, tariffs, and the economy. We'll bring you that interview as soon as we do get it. In the meantime, we are still awaiting to hear from President Trump at the White House. He's with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel. And at this point, they did cancel a 2:30 press conference that they were supposed to do. That was canceled a little earlier in the day. Still, though, we are expected to hear them take questions from journalists at the White House. We'll bring you those comments when we do get them. All that and more coming up over the next 2 hours right here on Bloomberg Business Week Daily. First up, though, a check of the day's trade and top business stories. Here he is, Charlie.
Hi, thank you very much. You got to keep it locked into Bloomberg Radio for the latest. We got 58 minutes to go until that closing bell clangs on Wall Street.
Botox, de dumme TikTok-menneskene dine blokkerte meg. Kan du unne meg dette navnet? Haha, Didrik. Det skal jeg fikse. Da skal bare koble til det der. Jeg kan ikke dette her. Som bare... Jeg tror for en sell-off etterpå, så nå sitter jeg fortsatt short, jævla skummelt. Nvidia kan gå videre. Nvidia er jo ikke så bemerket av tollavgiftene til Trump. Så Nvidia også Broadcom som drar opp akkurat nå. Så jeg tror ikke å få litt sell-off her nå. Veldig forsiktig. Så nå begynner vi med copper-tradinga nå. Nå bare varme opp litt, bare bli kjent med alt her. For jeg har ikke tradet med det oppsettet her på 100 år egentlig. Så vi også tester ut YouTube også, så jeg kommer til å begynne å snakke litt engelsk der.
Intraday move for the S&P 500 index after that erroneous report for the president's willingness to consider a blanket tariff pause, which the White House denied. Again, bottom line here, we saw a move of 7% intraday on the S&P.
Ja, det var, vi gikk faktisk 1100 poeng opp på Dow Jones på grunn av fake news. Fake news. Hva tenker du om shipping-aksjoner? Skal du fortsette oppover, eller faller det, tror du? Jeg tror at det kommer til å være ganske frem tilbake nå, for å se hva Kina svarer med i dag. Nå har Trump truet Kina med videre 50% tollsats. Så jeg kan jo få litt action på det. Men basically så tror jeg vi har tatt ut det meste her.
For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Hey, thanks so much for that update, Charlie Pellet. I'm looking at the S&P 500. I got the HCPI function on the Bloomberg terminal. Fell as much as 4.7% today. Rose as much as 3.4%. 4%. As we just heard from Charlie Pellet, we're down right now by about 0.4%.
Tusen kommer opp og fram, Tusen hjertelig fra oss. Nå har vi ikke oppe og går etter enda, men takk skal du ha. Det blir morsomt å begynne å trene en live også. Jeg savner det.
America's team leader. He's the author of several books, including What Goes Up, An Oral History of Wall Street from the Great Depression through the Internet Bubble and the 9/11 attacks. He joins us from just outside. Well, no, you're here today.
I'm here.
Oh my gosh, he's back with us. On Friday, he was remote, and we relied a lot on you, and we're doing that again, because when you wrote that book, What Goes Up, that time span included Black Monday. A lot of people over the weekend, the chatter online was a little concerned that what we're going to see on Monday is going to look a little bit like what we saw in 1987.
Så er det Power Hour siste timen her nå.
Maybe the massive crash, no.
I would say there
Halva
was,
Nature
in
Fly.
87,
Lenge
there
siden.
was a palpable
Det
sense
går bra med denne karen.
of things coming unglued. And then on the Sunday before, well, it was the Saturday and the Sunday before, Treasury Secretary at the time, Jim Baker, came out and made a couple of remarks that really scared
Botox inn til å prøve i
came
livet.
in on Monday morning.
Må ikke gi opp, vet du. Er vi heldige nå, så får vi litt sell-off, så er det litt mer penger her nå.
Going, oh my God, you know, things are going to blow up. Here, it was less clear. I mean, I remember I was looking
Apple
at
fortsetter å falle på grunn av
They came down a
Kina-tariffene.
lot,
Fortsetter å
but they
falle
weren't
ned
down
4,7%, 5%
much as, say,
ish.
China was.
Nvidia kom litt ned igjen også, var opp
So there
5,5%,
wasn't
da var ned
this
7% på det
sense
meste.
that, like,
Det er sell-off her nå.
the US was just going to buy.
Jeg er short,
If anything,
dere som
it was
lurer.
going to be like more of a global spread.
I dag har jeg gjort det bra.
So,
Jeg har gjort 4.500 kroner om til nesten 30.
a more predictable route. And then it had to be lifted up by the Fed. This was something where, you know, it's kind of building.
What does that tell us then about
Vi kan fort falle ned til under 17.200 her.
we're in? If this is just gradually building, we don't have one black.
Hvis du lurer på hva jeg ser for noe, så har jeg en broker her.
So the
En annen broker der.
Bizarrely, the
Og så
concern
har jeg
is that
en
things
annen broker
are
der.
actually
Og så
moving
har jeg en annen broker
fairly
der.
normally, which means we haven't hit
Så jeg har
a bottom.
4 forskjellige
Means we
brokers
aren't
oppe
seeing
samtidig.
panic or capitulation, whatever word you really want to use. What you are seeing is people desperately wanting the president to back off of tariffs. So as soon as that rumor hit, we went up, you know, we moved, as you pointed out, you know, 8 percentage points. So wham, swing up, and then it gets taken out because that's not exactly true. But there is a very simple cure. Like Black Monday was, there were systemic problems. There were people who were missing. Right. Yeah. There were people who were going to have. This is what I was watching for last night. Was like margin calls.
Right.
And situations where big hedge funds had been caught off sides, weren't going to be able to make the payments, and now you have counterparties that are wondering where the money's going to come from. That is not the case now. They're just begging President Trump to get rid of the tariffs.
In other words, like you said on Friday, this is orderly.
This is orderly. And the orderliness of it is what's scary to market pros, because it's when things get disorderly.
På catchen så hyggelig. Selvfølgelig, Nate. Var så vidt litt positiv for ikke komme videre på intervju til TV-programmet nå som det er så mye action-markedet. Jo, kanskje, men jeg ble litt sånn der små... Jeg ble litt sånn irritert, ass. Jeg ble valgt ut. Skal han på TV? Meg og resten av folket. Og så klarer de å si at jeg er ikke tydeligvis skrudd riktig i hodet mitt. Finner jeg på kopptreningen på. Jeg holder på nå. Jeg driver og... Jeg skal lage en ny konto på 20 000, så jeg skal gjøre alt live her. Jeg skal gjøre alt riktig. 2 sekunder.
So if the goal is to reshore industry, that's going to take a long time.
We had Dan Ives from Wedbush sitting in that chair right there, telling us an hour ago that he spent time in Taiwan. He's seen the way that these devices are made. He's seen the factories. He said, that's not happening in New Jersey.
No. And it's I mean, there's a reason why they moved there in the first place as well. And So if we want cheaper goods, that's part of this. There are a bunch of different things that go into the creation of our, our economic flow.
Okay.
This is like, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to change the behavior of other countries? Are we trying to change the financial system itself? What's the goal?
I also think of, if I were running a business, would I necessarily start building a factory in the U.S. and completely pull my operations from offshore, only to then have potentially these tariffs reversed slightly, and then you already started building? Do you think
that's a good point?
Is that?
This is going to all be in the earnings reports, because what you do if you're a CEO right now is sort of stand pat. So growth is going to be more challenging. The idea of expansion becomes should we or shouldn't we? I mean, you have to realize that there's a reason why manufacturing moved to Malaysia, moved to Vietnam, and that's because China has become more expensive. Because as economies grow, their employees expect more pay, so they go to the lowest producer. So the idea that we're going to bring everything back here, that's a multi-year project with dubious results and flies in the face of capitalism as we know it. If the idea is to get countries to change their behavior and negotiate with the president, then we'll see what we can do.
So when Emily came over here 20 minutes ago, the S&P 500 was in the green. It's now down 0.8%. Why is there such a lack of conviction directionally with today's trade?
Because we don't really know what's going on. There was
conviction based on something the White House poured cold water on.
Oh, yeah.
There was a tweet.
Well, there was conviction when we came in, and we were down 4% right away, or whatever it was. And then there was conviction on the upside, because what that leak was something that the traders have kind of been expecting. So that kind of played into their priors, and suddenly it just went, everything went up. But right now, it's hard to know where we're going to go next.
What you're referring to, it is actually the most read story on the Bloomberg terminal in the last hour. I encourage everybody to go check it out. Jess Metton, Bailey Lipschultz, Esha Day. It's called This Is Madness, the 15 Minutes That Rocked Stock Market Best.
Just after 10 a.m.,
Hvor skal jeg skrive det? Kan noen gjøre det for meg? Stream elements?
It's kind of wild.
Nei, jeg skjønner ikke en dritt der. Nå prater Nå prater jo Discord. Hva faen skjer nå? Hater ting, ass.
Market downturns, a lot of single day crashes. How does this one compare to history when you think about this? Sell-off seems to be all focused on one very specific event, whereas I don't know, I think the financial crisis, obviously there wasn't just one headline that traders were all counting on or waiting for, but this is so specific to just one
the scary thing with crashes is when credit is heavily involved. When you have your traders concerned that debts aren't going to get paid off, or that rates are just tumbling or rising. This is not a credit meltdown. It's an equity meltdown, and it's because stock prices went way up on AI speculation, and then if growth is going to be pared back, which is what tariffs would probably do, then you have to take out some of this. So it's not as scary, I would say, as when you look at the global financial crisis in 08, 09, there was a sense the knife was going to keep falling, and if you grabbed it, it was going to slide right through your hands and slice your hand off. This is not that kind of thing. This is more it actually could be stopped by one guy. That's different.
A weird thing happened to me this weekend, Eric, and it was when I was with a lot of friends who were about my age, we're kind of getting close to middle age, not thinking about retirement, but people who have kids, saving for college.
Sånn, jeg klar for kopptrening. En ny konto, skal føre på 20,000 her nå.
These are normal people who don't work in the industry.
Da må den kontoen hete
who's trying to sell everything right now because he is scared that something fundamentally is shifting in the economic landscape. He's the second person I've talked to who's expressed concern to me that those words, this time is different. What would you say to those folks having studied other crises?
I would say that they're the contrarian indicators.
Jeg har så mange skjermer her, så jeg må trykke på
It's
for
the
å
same
snakke
thing
med
going
riktig vedkommende.
The famous story is Sidney Weinberg, who at the time was the head of Goldman Sachs, getting tips from his shoe shine guy, and he walks back into Goldman and he's like, sell everything because this is just going to be a nightmare. And so when you start seeing people who normally aren't engaged with this stuff having very strong convictions about where things are going to go, they tend to go in the other way. There really isn't a systemic problem here. That's the thing.
It's not a systemic problem, he argues, with the markets. He thinks it's a systemic problem with globalization and with the president changing the world order that he grew up with.
I just don't think that Wall Street is ready to give up the global order. And the global order is global. Like, so it's not just Wall Street. China doesn't want to give it up. You know, so people want the financial markets. They want the financial markets to work. And the question is how and when that will start happening. But I don't see us reordering away from capitalism, because even in the trade landscape, you have other countries that are trying to band together to create trade alliances on their own without us. So this genie is out of the bottle.
Eric Weiner, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time today.
Happy to be here.
Let's head now to the White House. We're getting tape playback of the president meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Let's listen in.
Nå faller Apple videre, konkurranseindeksen. Nvidia også opp for fallende her nå, fallende kurv her nå. Jeg closer shortman her nå hvert øyeblikk. Og så tar jeg de pengene ut og putter på den kontoen der, og da er jeg med dere. Da begynner vi på scratch på 20 000. Vil du vente litt lenge med å kjøpe indeksfond? Nei, jeg tror jeg kan begynne å plukke indeksfond nå. Kan man deposit med krypto nå? Ja, du kan deposit med krypto. Du kan deposit med krypto, ta ut krypto, alt. Men DNB var litt strenge. De ville ikke, så vi måtte bruke en av de andre bankene også. Vi måtte bruke en engelsk bank i dag, for de tok ikke mot penger fra Dubai. De er ikke så glad i Dubai. Jævla tullete.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Don. Thank you.
Nå skal Trump prate så her.
Thank you for inviting me again to the White House.
Da går opp, oransje jævelen.
You stand by us. You're standing with us. You are a great champion of our lives.
Great champion, you fucking orange.
You do the things that you say you do, and I think that people respect that enormously. I certainly do, and the people of Israel do, and I think the Jewish people do as well. We just saw your representative in the Department of Justice fighting anti-Semitism, standing up for Israel in international forums. I just want you to know from the heart, it's deeply, deeply appreciated. As you said, we had the opportunity to talk today about many subjects. First, if I can mention tariffs, it's a subject of some interest today. I can tell you that I said to the President a very simple thing. We will eliminate the trade deficit with the United States. We intend to do it very quickly. We think it's the right thing to do. And we're going to also eliminate trade barriers, a variety of trade barriers that have been put up unnecessarily. And I think Israel can serve as a model for many countries who ought to do the same. I recognize the...
Det gikk opp 200 penger på denne kødden der.
It says, you know, we're allowing other countries to put tariffs on us, but we don't put tariffs on them. And, you know, I'm a free trade champion, and free trade has to be fair trade. And I think that's basically the position that you've put forward, Mr. President. We are going to eliminate the tariffs, and rapidly. I had the opportunity to speak to Secretary Lutnick yesterday. We talked about how we could effect this quickly, and I hope to bring the solution very quickly. We're not talking about intentions. We're not talking about, you know, just words. We're talking about results. And those results are going to come. So that's the first.
Thank you very much. It's very nice.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. President, what about the hostages to you?
Well,
What about the hostages?
Jeg visste ikke han skulle prate i dag her.
we did. We spoke about not only the hostages, But about Gaza, the hostages obviously is a human story of just unbearable agony. I speak to the families. I spoke to them yesterday. Spoke to another one when I was in Hungary before I came here. I speak to them every day. They're in agony. The hostages are in agony, and we want to get them all out. Steve Witkoff, who's President Trump's very able representative, helped us get a deal that got 25 out. We're working now on another deal that we hope will succeed. And we're committed to getting all the hostages out, but also eliminating the evil tyranny of Hamas in Gaza.
Trump-rocker, så heter jeg Dr. Botox. Vi lagde akkurat en konto der nå, den kontoen der. Det her er kontoen som kommer til å være på Frontrocker, den kontoen her.
Which we discussed as well, including the countries that might be amenable and are amenable to accepting Palestinians of their free choice if they choose to go there. And I think that's the second thing that we discussed. But the hostages came right on top. We also discussed the situation in Syria. We've had neighborly relations with Turkey that have deteriorated, and we don't want to see Syria being used by anyone, including Turkey, as a base for attack in Israel. Turkey is a country that has a great relationship with the United States. The president has a relationship with the leader of Turkey. We discussed how we can avoid this conflict in a variety of ways, and I think we can't have a better interlocutor than the President of the United States for this purpose. And of course, we also discussed Iran. Look, we're both united in the goal that Iran does not ever get nuclear weapons. If it can be done diplomatically in a full way, the way it was done in Libya, I think that would be a good thing. But whatever happens, we have to make sure that Iran does not have nuclear weapons. That's the end of my speech.
Mr. President, can you explain why is your
We're having direct
getting all
talks
the
with, wait. We're having direct talks with Iran, and they've started. It'll go on Saturday. We have a very big meeting, and we'll see what can happen. And I think everybody agrees that doing a deal would be preferable to doing the obvious. And the obvious is not something that I want to be involved with, or frankly, that Israel wants to be involved with if they can avoid it. So we're going to see if we can avoid it. But it's getting to be very dangerous territory. And hopefully those talks will be successful. And I think it would be in Iran's best interest if they are successful. We hope that's going to happen. And we had just a lot of good talks on a lot of things. I appreciate very much what you said about the tariffs. We've been ripped off and taken advantage of by many countries over the years, and can't do it anymore. Just can't do it anymore. We can't be the stupid people anymore. And it's all because of the people that sat in the seat right here. Not your seat, but this seat. They allowed things to happen to our country that they shouldn't have allowed to happen on trade and other things, many other things. I mean, look at what's happened with our last president, where he allowed millions of people to come into our country with an open border. Who would want an open border? How stupid is that? But he allowed millions and millions of people, and of the millions, and I think it was 21 million people, but let's say 3 of them were serious criminals, serious murderers and drug dealers and gang members and people from jails. All the jails emptied out right into our country, right along the open border on Mexico, generally the Mexico. Okay, they came in from Canada too, by the way, a lot. But generally speaking on the southern border. And what a shame it is that we are now working very hard to get them out, get the criminals out, get the murderers out, the drug dealers, the mentally insane, get them out. They dropped the mentally insane in our country too. And this was all done by the Biden administration. It's a disgrace that we have to work so hard. And then we have judges that try and protect these people, but they didn't protect us when the people were being let in. But to get them out is never easy with these people. So I think we're doing a great job. The border is the best it's ever been. It's even as strong as it was. I had a great, solid border. I think it might even be tougher right now and stronger. So people are coming into our country, but they're coming in legally. We have a legal process, and we have that moving along properly, because we need people to come into our country. But we want people that can love our country and cherish our country. So that's where we are. And with that, any questions?
Mr. President, the European Union to the markets today, and would you be open to a pause in tariffs to allow for negotiations?
Well, we're not looking at that. We have many countries that are coming to negotiate deals with us, and they're going to be fair deals. And in certain cases, they're going to be paying substantial tariffs. There'll be fair deals. As you know, I spoke this morning with the Prime Minister of Japan, and we had a very good conversation. They're coming. And I said, one thing, you're going to have to open up your country, because we sold no cars, like 0 cars in Japan, and they sold millions of cars into our country. They don't really take our agriculture.
Hører dere det jeg hører med nyheter og sånn?
They don't take what they're supposed to be.
Hører dere Trump
We have a
prate?
great relationship with Japan. We're going to keep it that way, but they're coming in to meet, and other countries are coming in. With China,
Bra.
as you know, against my statement, they put a 34%
Begynner å få på litt musikk og sånn igjen. Vi kommer til å sitte her hver dag nå.
what their ridiculous tariffs were already.
Det var første dagen
And
nå
I
vi
said, if that
tester ut
tariff
alt.
isn't removed by tomorrow at 12 o'clock, we're putting a 50% tariff on above the tariffs that we put on. So they've gone for years. They've become a rich country because of people, again, that
Når får vi lagt ned? Det kommer hver dag nå. I dag kom det noe, det kommer nye sånne metoder hver dag. Vi venter med sånn bankoverføring, det tror jeg går nå. Kredittkort tror jeg går nå. Krypto går nå. Treffer jeg snart targeten min. 17,200.
I'll tell you what, it's an honor to do it, because we have been just destroyed what they've done to our system.
Har du kommet inn da?
$36 trillion of debt for a reason.
De har sagt de bruker cirka 3 uker på å få på plass alt.
We'll be talking to China. We'll be talking to a lot of different countries. And I think
Vi får sånn instant pay og instant payout. Og så får vi opp til 500 giring. Enkelte kan få 1000 giring.
And we didn't put America first, we put America last. The people that were in the Oval Office put America last, and we're not going to stand for it. Yeah.
Bank i det oppe. Du får registrert konto på Frontbroker på under 10 sekunder gratis.
Secondly, there have been some mixed messages from your administration. You're talking about negotiations, and yet others in your administration are saying that these tariffs are actually permanent. What is the action?
Well, they can both be true. There can be permanent tariffs, and there can also be negotiations, because there are things that we need beyond tariffs. We need open borders. You know, we almost had a deal with China where we're going to open up China. It was almost done. Some of you remember it during my first term. And it was very disappointing. We ended up making a great deal. $50 billion worth of product was sold. $50 billion. You'd like that in Israel. And I made that deal, but it wasn't the deal that I wanted. It was the deal that I wanted was that, plus they were going to open up China so that our companies could go into China and compete.
Apple faller videre, Microsoft faller videre, Nvidia begynte å falle litt her nå. Broadcom var fortsatt oppe, var oppover 5,5% sted, nå opp 4,3, så nå er på vei ned nå. Indeksene pusher opp på nedsida. Er vi heldige nå, så må vi en sell-off på close.
There are a lot of things like opening up countries that were totally closed. China's essentially a closed country. In fact, it is a closed country.
Kom litt an på hva han sier da.
What they do is they charge tariffs so that if you sell cars or if you sell anything, nobody's going to buy it because the price is out of control. But that's true with a lot of other countries also. So we're going to get fair deals and good deals with every country, and if we don't, we're going to have nothing to do with them. They're not going to be allowed to participate in the United States. Mr. President, many of time. This gentleman is all day long.
Mr. President, thank you for the chance. Many of Palestinian Americans who voted for you and not for Biden because you've promised them to end the war in Gaza.
Very honored by that vote, too.
The war is still going on and there's no hostage deal. Do you have any update on that?
Well, I'd like to see the war stop, and I think the war will stop at some point that won't be in the too distant future. Right now we have a problem with hostages. We're trying to get the hostages out. We got quite a few of them out, but it's a long process. It shouldn't be that long. We have a big problem that we've done. I think I'll ask Pete to maybe talk about it for a second, because a lot of people are asking. The Houthis, we've been very tough and very successful militarily. We've really damaged them badly. These were people shooting down ships and other things, by the way, flying objects like airplanes. And we've put a major hurt on the Houthis, which nobody's been able to do. We've really hit them hard, and they know it, and they don't know what to do. And it's every night, night after night. And we've gotten many of their leaders and their experts. They're experts on missiles. I mean, they actually make missiles. Nobody thought that. But they make missiles. They're highly sophisticated, and they're very tough. But they've been very badly damaged. Nobody else was able to do that but us. Pete, you want to discuss that, please?
Yes, sir. It's been a bad 3 weeks for the Houthis, and it's about to get worse. It's been a devastating campaign, whether it's underground facilities, weapons manufacturing, bunkers, troops in the open, air defense assets. We are not going to relent, and it's only to get more unrelenting until the Houthis declare they will stop shooting at our ships. And we've been very clear at the Iranians as well. They should not continue to provide support to the Houthis, and that message has been made very clear. So we have a lot more options and a lot more pressure to apply, and we know, because we see how devastating this campaign has been in them, and we will not relent.
We have a great military. There's no military like our military. And despite Biden having given a lot, but nevertheless a pretty small piece, but it was a lot of our military away in Afghanistan, and one of the dumbest situations, I think, and maybe the most embarrassing situation we've ever been involved in, that short period of time in Afghanistan. What a disgrace that was, but left a lot of our military behind, left. You see them in their annual parades where they're parading trucks that are armor plated and different things that they can't, but it's many billions of dollars we left behind. But despite that, we have a tremendous military. That was a very small portion, because we rebuilt the military during my first term, and we have great things happening with our military. We also essentially approved a budget, which is in the facility, you'll like to hear this, of $1 trillion, $1 trillion, and nobody's seen anything like it. We have to build our military, and we're very cost conscious, but the military is something that we have to build, and we have to be strong, because you got a lot of bad forces out there now. So we're going to be approving a budget, and I'm proud to say, actually, the biggest one we've ever done for the military. We're cutting other things that were under DOGE, but under a lot of other. When you look at a woman getting $2 billion for environmental, and it had nothing to do with environmental, and they had $100 in the bank, and they give her $2 billion. Many of those cases, all that stuff is going to be cut out. But we are getting a very, very powerful military. We have things under order now, the likes of which we've never had before. We've never had the kind of aircraft, the kind of missiles, anything that we have ordered. And it's in many ways too bad that we have to do it, because hopefully we're not going to have to use it. But the military is very, very powerful, and it's going to remain that way.
How do you, Mr. President, please? Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to ask you.
This
is the first time we hear that the U.S. is having a direct contact with the Iranians. Is it possible to give us some more information at what level it's the U.S.
Han holder ikke kjeft. Han prater jo så det går spredt alle veier.
We're dealing with the Iranians. We have a very big meeting on Saturday, and we're dealing with them directly. You know, a lot of people say, oh, maybe you're going through surrogates. Or
Nå prater om krigen, og Israel snakker om å ikke kjøre tariff mot USA. Nå prater han opp.
It would be really great for Iran, I can tell you that. But hopefully, we're not going to have to get into that. We are meeting very importantly on Saturday at almost the highest level. And we'll see how it works out.
Gikk opp 250 poeng på han der oransje mannen pratet.
U.S. trading partners into the hands of the Chinese.
I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about it. If they want to be in the hands of the U.S., they don't want to be in the hands of the Chinese. And the Chinese have turned out to be really not very good at that. People that are with us, they're with us. But we cannot be taken advantage of any longer. I used to watch these deals for years. I've been talking about it for years. You know, I've been talking about it for 35 years, how our country is being ripped off. I mean, 30 years ago it was Japan, then it was something else, then it was another group, then it was China. China's doing the best job of it, frankly. And it's just not going to happen, not going to happen.
Mr. President, you said it may
EU
take...
has said that they have offered 0 for 0 tariffs on cars and industrial goods. Is that not enough?
Well, the EU...
Jeg tredje der.
The EU has been very tough over the years. It was, I always say, it was formed to really do damage to the United States in trade. That's the reason it was formed. It was formed with all of the countries from Europe, I guess most of them, not all of them, but most of them. And they formed together to create a little bit of a monopoly situation, to create a unified force against the United States for trade. So they have NATO, which is largely the same countries, and they took advantage of us dollar-wise and militarily until I got there. You know, I was able to get $600 billion from NATO, where they paid NATO because most of these nations weren't even paying. We were paying for NATO, so we're paying them to guard them militarily, and they're screwing us on trade. So that's not a good combination. So now it's really turned around. It's the opposite, and the European Union's been very bad to us.
Lang streamdag. Jeg vet ikke, jeg bare tester ut I dag. Jeg kommer til å sitte live fra morgenen, men jeg vet ikke om jeg skal være lenge. Jeg vet ikke, det litt opp til dere.
They don't take anything practically. And yet they send millions of cars in a year, Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen, BMWs. They're sending millions and millions of cars into the U.S., but we don't have a car that's been sold to the European Union or other places, but let's go for the European Union. And it's not going to be that way. It's got to be fair and reciprocal. It's got to be fair. It's not fair. We have a deficit with the European Union of $350 billion. And it's going to disappear fast. And one of the reasons and one of the ways that that can disappear easily and quickly is they're going to have to buy our energy from us because they need it. They're going to have to buy it from us. They can buy it. We can knock off $350 billion in 1 week. They have to buy and commit to buy a like amount of energy. And we have that. You know, we have more energy than any country in the world. I don't know if you know that. He knows everything, but the one thing he may not know, we have more energy than any country in the world. We have more of every kind of energy, every form of energy, from oil and gas to coal. And people talk about, I call it beautiful, clean coal. As you know, Germany is opening up a coal plant a week. They tried the windmills and it didn't work. They tried all the other solutions and they were ready to go out of business. Now they're doing a coal plant a week. China is now up to 2 coal plants. They're opening 2 major coal plants every single week in China, all over China, and then we're not allowed to use coal. Well, we have clean, beautiful coal more than anybody else. We have oil and gas more than anybody else. We have the most energy of any country in the world, including Saudi Arabia, including everybody, by a lot. And I took it to #1. We were #3, and I took it to #1 during my administration. And the reason that we were hurt so badly and the reason that we went into such incredible inflation during Biden is energy. It was also their bad spending, but energy. Because they played around with this incredible thing that we had built, this administration had built, and the energy costs went through the roof. And when that went up, everything else followed. Now, if you look at what's happening, you're going to see this today. I said we're going to try and get groceries down.
Så gått opp 1.200 poeng på ikke
beautiful term. Eggs. So when I got in, the press went absolutely crazy the first week. They said eggs have quadrupled in price.
Greens,
I said I just got here. Tell me about it.
Supercar.
And Brooke Rollins and our team did a great job. Eggs are down now 79%, and they're all over the place. And this was a problem that somebody else would have taken a long time to cure. We have energy is down, we have interest rates are down, we have groceries, meaning food is down, we have everything is down at levels that nobody ever thought possible. Energy looks like it's going to be in the $2.50 a gallon range and maybe below that for a car, so for gasoline. So We're really doing amazing. I mean, we're cutting prices because prices got so high, people couldn't live. I mean, the prices for groceries, the prices for standard groceries, standard things.
We are doing so good.
They couldn't live, and now those prices.
Og så kjører han hele
so call them groceries.
amerikansk økonomien I resesjon.
Energy's down.
We are doing so good.
Everything's down, and the interest rates. The beauty there is when we refinance debt. You know, debt's become such a big factor in this country. We're going to start paying debt off with tariffs and other things, but it's such a big factor because the interest rate's so high. Well, now that's coming way down, so our budget's going to look a lot better because interest costs are way down, and I guess I've done that.
Many Israelis are watching you now on live show. Good. What is your specific way of getting the hostages out from the horrific captivity?
We are trying very hard to get the hostages out. We're looking at another ceasefire. We'll see what happens, but we want to get the hostages out. The Israeli people want the hostages out more than anything. They want the hostages out. This man is working very hard with us to do that. I mean, I don't know. I hope he's being appreciated because he's been a great leader. He's working very, very hard on the hostages and many other things. And there are plenty of things you have to work on. It's a tough place in the world, isn't it?
I have a good partner.
Yeah, you do have a good partner, and so do we. We're working very hard on the hostages.
If you're going to negotiate a new deal with Iran, can you elaborate how it's going to be more effective than the JCPOA?
Mulighet for økt rente? Nei. Det blir rentekutt I USA, det blir rentekutt I Norge antagelig.
Different and maybe a lot stronger. But they were so happy when we made that first deal because we did get a lot out. You know, I had people right in this office, this beautiful Oval Office. They came.
Det skulle vært renteøkning I USA nå, men han kjører økonomien I resesjon, så han tvinger jo rentene ned, og så kjører han bonds opp. Så han setter hele amerikanske økonomien I sjakkmatt.
Was there any sign of love? You were there, 10 people. It's only 10, but it's pretty representative. Did the Hamas show any signs of like help or liking you? Did they wink at you? Did they give you a piece of bread extra? Did they give you a meal on the side, like, you know, you think of doing? Like what happened in Germany, what happened elsewhere. People would try and help people that were in unbelievable distress. They said no. I said, oh.
Kommer til å stikke av. Men jeg vet ikke om de setter ned renta om de gjør det til neste uke eller neste måned, men de må gjøre det nå snart. Da kommer det til å gå rett opp.
Unbelievable. And the lives, you know, they lived in a pipe. Not really a tunnel, it was a pipe. And they always thought they were suffocating, they were going to suffocate. And then they'd open up the pipe and it was like 3.5 feet high. This isn't, you know, we hear tunnel is bad, but pipes are worse. And the stories I heard were incredible. But I just said, was there any sign of potential love or affection? And there were none whatsoever. It was amazing to me. There was nothing like, here, take this, it's a little extra meal or something. They lived like hell. I don't know. They seemed to be, they were amazing to me because they seemed to be pretty normal. They weren't scarred, but I guarantee underneath they have to be scarred. And one was there for 356 days, another was there for about 180 days, you know, a long time. These are people that have been really, really horribly treated. I've never seen anything like it, actually. I was very surprised to hear the answer.
Thank you, Mr. President. Are there 2 or 3 countries that are on your list that you feel are farther along in getting their tariffs lowered?
I think there are many that want to get rid of tariffs right now. European Union, I mean, as badly as they've treated us, they've brought their car tariffs essentially off. I guess they brought it down to 2.5, and I hear maybe to nothing.
Skal bare hente en Pepsi.
It's non-monetary tariffs. It's tariffs.
Targeten min før han begynte å prate jo her nede, men så begynte han å prate, så gikk jo ikke rett ned. Men jeg har fått penger da.
They drop a bowling ball on the top of your car from 20 feet up in the air, and if there's a little dent, they say, no, I'm sorry, your car doesn't qualify. When the same car from Germany or anything would dent likewise, unless you can have an army tank, it's going to dent. So they come up with rules and regulations that are just designed for one reason, that you can't sell your product in those countries, and we're not going to let that happen. those are called non-monetary barriers. They make barriers that are so tough that it's impossible to qualify. So tariffs are a big part of it, but there's another big part of it, and that's barriers. They also do something else. They manipulate their currency, and they drive it down. They want to drive it down low currencies. You know, it sounds better to have a high currency, a strong dollar or whatever, but they bring their currency down, and when it competes with our currency, it's very hard to sell a tractor. It's very hard to sell product because their currency is low and ours is much higher relatively. And so it makes it very hard. I speak to a lot of companies that do business, tractor companies, and they say it's so hard to sell because what they've done is they've lowered the yen or they've lowered the yuan or they've lowered their currency so that it's very hard to compete. We don't want that either. So we have a lot of things that we're talking about, but we're going to fix it properly, and it's going to be fair to everybody. And in the end, I think we're going to have a world that does a lot better, you know, but they have to respect the United States. And nobody but me would do this. Nobody but me would do this. You know, it would be nice to serve a nice, easy term, but we have an opportunity to change the fabric of our country. We have an opportunity to reset the table on trade. We lose billions of dollars. We lose close to $2 trillion a year on trade. We lose $1 trillion a year to China. China! We lose hundreds of billions of dollars a year on trade to China.
China!
Hundreds of billions of dollars
Tror Buffett inne nå.
Probably
Tenker han dere plukker
close
litt.
to $2 trillion.
Plukker litt, sånn som meg.
Number one, why would we do that? And then you have to say, is it sustainable? Then you hear about all of
Han
the
solgte
people
alt
that
i
say,
fjor,
"Well,
han.
deficits, if we
I
have a
oktober.
deficit with the country, if the country
Halvt
has a
år
big
siden solgte han
surplus
alt.
with us, like China has a massive
En som sitter
surplus
på nå, han
that
sitter
they
fortsatt på
take and they
Colaen
spend on
og
their
Bank of
military. Well, we
America-aksjer.
don't want that.
Han solgte masse av
I
det
don't
også.
want them to take $500–600 billion a year and spend it on their military. I don't want them spending money on their military.
Jeg burde kanskje kle meg litt annerledes når jeg skal bli en tredje lag. Jeg ser ut som en boms. Jeg tror kanskje ikke det ble mottatt så bra i utlandet. Når du ser på meg, så tenker du ikke at jeg kan en dritt. Liksom. Jeg får kanskje ha på en
We don't want that. So it's going to be very interesting. It's the only chance our country will have to reset the table. Because no other president would be willing to do what I'm doing or to even go through it. Now, I don't mind going through it because I see a beautiful picture at the end. We are making tremendous progress.
Ja, men jeg liker ikke solcaser. Solcaser for meg så er det risiko. Det er så jævla mye faen med det. Jeg er blitt skremt vett av på rekk.
You know why? Because they're getting beaten badly because of what's happening. They're getting beaten badly. They're being devalued as countries. But it's the only chance we're going to have to reset the table on trade. And when we do, we're going to come out unbelievably well. We're going to have a strong country economically again. And we're going to have those factories that are empty all over the United States. We've lost 90,000 plants and factories. Think of this, 90,000, you wouldn't think it's possible. 90,000 plants and factories since NAFTA, which was, by the way, the worst trade deal ever developed, ever had by any country anywhere, NAFTA. And I terminated NAFTA. Everybody said it would be impossible. And I terminated it through Congress. We terminated it. You had to get it through Congress. It was a trap. It was a horrible thing. And we got it done. And we went to the USMCA, which was much better. The problem is they cheat. They cheat like crazy. Canada cheats. Mexico cheats. Just one of those things. But we are resetting a table, and we're going to have great trade. And we're going to have a very strong country. Our country is going to be at a level that has maybe never been, or maybe, you know, our country was the strongest, believe it or not, from 1870 to 1913. You know why? It was all tariff-based. We had no income tax. Then in 1913, some genius came up with the idea of let's charge the people of our country, not foreign countries that are ripping off our country. And the country was never that kind of wealth. We had so much wealth, we didn't know what to do with our money. We had meetings, we had committees, and these committees worked tirelessly to study one subject. We have so much money. What are we going to do with it? Who are we going to give it to? And I hope we're going to be in that position again.
plan to reduce the tariffs that the government put on Israeli goods, 17%.
72913 72913
Maybe not. Don't forget. We help Israel a lot.
Det den som blir copytrading.
That's a lot. Congratulations, by the way. That's pretty good. But we give Israel billions of dollars a year. Billions. It's one of the highest.
Oi sann,
we give
hvor er penga?
We give a lot of countries money. You wouldn't believe if I said we give Afghanistan a lot of money, didn't it? Because that was a Biden deal, another Biden deal. Not only did he embarrass us with that, but they give them billions of dollars, Afghanistan, right? So, no, we take good care of our friends, and we don't take care of our enemies. We're not taking care of our enemies anymore, but we do take care of our friends.
Mr. Department for the Times of Israel. The IDF is fighting again in the Gaza Strip. I myself might be called up in a month.
How long do you think the tariff will last? I don't know. I don't know. A couple of weeks, couple of months, I don't know.
I think it's an incredible.
It's a ghost note, so this is just going to be like some noise. That's it.
We would be involved in, but you know, having a peace force like the United States there, controlling and owning the Gaza Strip would be a good thing. Because right now, all it is for years and years, all I hear about is killing and Hamas and problems. And if you take the people, the Palestinians, and move them around to different countries, and you have plenty of countries that will do that, and you really have a freedom.
Come on, 17,200.
You call it the freedom zone, a free zone, a zone where people aren't going to be killed every day. That's a hell of a place. You know what I call it? A great location that nobody wants to live in, because they really don't. And when they have good living, real living, where Hamas and all of the problems they have, the level of death on the Gaza Strip is just incredible. And I've said it. I don't understand why Israel ever gave it up. Israel owned it. It wasn't this man, so I can say it. He wouldn't have given it up. I know him very well. There's no way. They took oceanfront property and they gave it to people for peace. How did that work out? Not good.
Is the immigration, sorry, Mr. President, is the immigration plan still on the agenda?
Which immigration?
From Gaza. From Gaza.
All it is a concept that I had that I think is good, and now people are copying it. You know, maybe do you want to tell? People are talking about the Trump plan. Gee, why do we do that? Would you like to answer that question?
I think what the president talked about is, first of all, to give people a choice. You know, Gazans were closed in, and every other place, including in arenas of battle. I mean, whether it's Ukraine or Syria or any other place, people could leave. Gaza was the only place where they locked them in. We didn't lock them in. They're locked in.
Du går bare på frontbroker, så går du her, så går du på copytrading, og så kan du søke her på Dr. Botox. Jeg kan ikke søke på meg selv da.
The president has a vision. Countries are responding to that vision.
We'll have
good news for you.
I will say people really do love that vision. It's a long-term vision, but so importantly is to have that be a safe field, because you're right smack in the middle of the Middle East. You're right along Israel. It should have never, ever been given away. It shouldn't have been given away by Israel. I don't know why they did it. I mean, I do know why, because they were promised peace, but that didn't work out too well, because it's one of the most dangerous pieces of land anywhere in the world. Gaza is one of the most dangerous places in the world. So they gave it away for good intention, and it didn't work out that way. And a lot of people like my concept, but you know, there are other concepts that I like too. And there are some concepts I don't like. You know what I don't like? The way it is now. Because right now it's a dangerous death trap, Gaza. Yeah.
Ja, gå inn med 20, du. Jeg bruker 20. Jo, alt er klart sånn sett, men det er forskjellige betalings... Det er mange som... Altså, det er klart, men det er ikke alle betalingsløsninger som er ferdig satt opp. Nå, i dag så kom det plutselig bankoverføring, det gikk i dag. Og så kom PayPal i går, det gikk i går. Og så kom krypto i dag. Så kommer det nye betalingsløsninger ut hele uka.
with the bombing, because they're bombing like crazy right now. They're bombing, I don't know what's happening there. That's not a good situation. So we're meeting with Russia, we're meeting with Ukraine, and we're getting sort of close, but I'm not happy with all the bombing that's going on in the last week or so. Horrible. It's a horrible thing. It's a horrible thing.
Can countries negotiate to get below 10%?
In terms of
In
tariffs?
terms of tariffs, yes.
Look, we've been ripped off and taken advantage of for 40, 50, 60 years.
2 sekunder skal jeg ringe og høre.
And the reason we got ripped off and the way they did it was tariffs. They would charge tariffs, massive numbers of dollars. And when you look at China, when I took over, it was at $507 billion they were making. I call it making. A lot of people say, oh, it doesn't mean anything, having a surplus. It means a lot, in my opinion. It's almost like a profit or loss statement. And when I took over, it was $507 billion that China was, this is originally, first term. And we were very, very tough on them because they were taking that money and they were building a military with it. Then when Biden came in, he let them get away with murder. He had no idea. I'll tell you what, that man had no idea what was happening, whether it was the border or China or anything else. He had no idea what was going on. And they went wild. China went wild. And the money they make is ridiculous, okay? It's just not gonna happen. And hopefully we'll get along with China. If we do, that's great. And if we don't, that's okay too. But we can't let that continue, because that's an abuse. They abused the poor people that sat in this seat. That poor Biden, he was abused by them. They took advantage of him, and I'm surprised. You know, they have smart people that were radical left lunatics, but they're smart. I'm surprised they'd allow that to happen. But we are going to bring great trade, and we're going to be fair to other countries. And I will say this, virtually every country wants to negotiate. If I didn't do what I did over the last couple of weeks, you wouldn't have anybody wants to negotiate. We would have gone to these countries, you want to talk? And they, well, we don't want to talk. Now they're coming to us. They're offering things like even Bibi, and this is unrelated because it's a different kind of a relationship, but he started off our conversation today that he's cutting all of the tariffs, he's cutting everything. He's going to get down to a free base. He's going to do things that, in all fairness, other countries, if they said that, would have never even thought about doing it. Now they're offering things to us that we would have never even thought of asking them for because they're experiencing a lot of hurt. And the hurt is that they've taken advantage of us and we finally fought back. Tariffs will make this country very rich. We're rich anyway, but we're rich in a certain way. We have $36 trillion in debt. I want to get rid of it, and we can do it quickly with proper deals. So when countries don't allow us to sell our product, but we allow them to sell their product, when they charge us massive amounts of money for the privilege of going into their country, those days are over. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Me?
Sure.
Me? Yeah. Thank you, Mr. President. On Iran, 2 questions, please. First, if you can give us more details about where the meeting on Saturday is going to take place.
I can just tell you there's a major meeting going on between us and Iran, and that'll take place on Saturday, and it's at top level.
And the second question about this. A lot of people think that talks are not going to lead anywhere because the Iranians will never...
Short nå, men Trump prater, altså, jeg vet ikke hvor smart det er.
If diplomacy fails, is the United States under your leadership ready to take military action to destroy the Iranian nuclear program and remove this threat?
Iron faller.
I think if the talks aren't successful with Iran, I think Iran is going to be in great danger, and I hate to say it. Great danger.
Nå turen Iran.
You know, it's not a complicated formula. Iran cannot have a nuclear.
Iran is in great danger.
Can't have it.
Believe me, they are in great danger.
Nuclear power that shouldn't have it, but I'm sure we'll be able to negotiate out of that too as part of this later on down the line.
Han ser på verden som et dataspill.
Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, and if the talks aren't successful, I actually think it'll be a very bad day for Iran if that's the case. Yeah.
Mr. President, on manufacturing, Mr. President.
Mr. President, was October
Robert, han er klin koko. Han er mer hjernedød enn jeg forventet. Jeg hadde litt sansen for han I starten, men nå synes han bare klønende.
So October 7th was a horrible day that some people, they
Marcus stenger om 5 minutter.
I can't believe they deny it from the standpoint of it. They do it because they think it's good politically. But October, I've seen the tapes, I've seen things that you don't want to see. October 7th was a horrible day, and it will go down as one of the really bad days in the history of the world. It was a horrible, horrible thing that happened. And they grabbed some of these people. I'll give you an example. When I was with the 10 hostages a few weeks ago, I said, so how many are there? 59. I said, oh, so 59, so we can get 59. They sort of knew the territory pretty good. And I said, how are they doing? They said, well, only 24 are living, the rest are dead. And these are young people largely. Young people don't die. You know, young people have an amazing ability to live. They can live through horrible things, but these are young people. And when they said that 24 are living and the rest are dead. And you know, I've had parents come up, Israeli parents largely. We have some Americans, and I guess we have one left, Alex. We have the one left. But I've had Israeli parents come up to me at events and say, my son is there. I said, well, how's he doing? Well, he's dead. But would you do me the biggest favor ever? Could you bring his body back home? They talked about a young dead boy and a young dead girl like they were living. And that could have something to do with religion. That could have something to do with, I guess.
You're listening to President Trump take questions in the Oval Office live at the White House, sitting alongside Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel. In the meantime, we have seen the markets close. And for a very eventful day, kind of a muted close, the S&P 500 fell just over 0.2%. The NASDAQ composite was higher by 0.1%. The Dow fell more than 0.9%. A reminder, the S&P 500 fell as much as 4.71% today, whereas it climbed as much as 3.4%. It did close out the day lower by 0.2%. Let's go back now to the White House, where we continue to hear live comments from President Trump.
But that second group, those people came out and I said, this is unbelievable. We're going back into a chapter in history that is one of the worst ever. It's really very bad. Okay?
Mr. President, thank you. You've said it could take 2 years to get American manufacturing fully up to speed in response to these tariffs. What happens in the meantime? Should Americans be prepared potentially for years?
Yeah, I'll tell you what happens. We have now $7 trillion. Think of this, $7 trillion of commitments from companies wanting to go in, from Apple to many, many companies.
But that takes time.
Many from Taiwan. What?
It takes time to
Of course it takes time. Well, are you asking me a question or are you telling me? Yeah, it takes time. You know, you got to build a thing called a factory. You have to build your energy. You have to do a lot of things. I'm giving them energy. You know, we're going to let them build their own power plants. They'll be their own. Essentially, they're going to be in charge of the power plant because our power is not reliable enough. You have a grid that's old and susceptible to a lot of things, including bombing and weather and a lot of other things. And we're going to give them record timing in terms of approvals of electric plants. Most of them want to build electric plants. We need massive amounts of electricity if we're going to compete with China and others. And interestingly, we're way ahead right now in the AI race with China. But the way we lose that race is if we can't give them electric. But we have more plants being built. We have everything. We're doing so great. And we want to keep it that way. And tariffs will be an important part of it. But one of the other things, Lee Zeldin's doing a fantastic job, head of environmental protection. And he's doing very rapid approvals for people to get, for big companies that are going to build a plant that's going to cost billions of dollars. And we're going to get them their approvals. They have to be environmentally perfect, everything good, but they're going to be in record time, a matter of months versus a matter of many, many years.
Skatteparadiser, alle sammen.
From Haaretz. Turkey claims it
will stabilize the situation in Syria.
Turkey?
Yeah. Israel doesn't want Turkey to influence Syria. What do you think? Do you think Turkey's influence in Syria can actually make it a better, more peaceful country, or vice versa?
Well, I have great relations with a man named Erdogan. Have you heard of him?
Hva er det du sier for noe? Jeg er på TikTok nå, jeg er på YouTube overalt.
And I happen to like him, and he likes me, and I know the press will get very angry. He likes Erdogan, but I do, and he likes me, and we've never had a problem, and we've gone through a lot, and we've never had a problem. We've always got, as you remember, we got our minister back from Turkey. You remember that? And this was a big deal at the time, and we got him back. And I told the Prime Minister, I said, just, Bibi, if you have a problem with Turkey, I really think I'm going to be able to work it out. You know, I have a very, very good relationship with Turkey and with their leader, and I think we'll be able to work it out. So I hope that's not going to be a problem. I don't think it will be a problem. Now, with that being said, I believe it was Turkey, and I said that to him. I said it. I said, congratulations. You've done what nobody's been able to do in 2,000 years. You've taken over Syria with different names, but same thing.
Ja, du må ha kommet til Dubai.
I was taking it over through surrogates. He goes, no, it was not me. I said it was you, but that's okay. You don't have to say, well, sort of maybe it was me. Okay. But what he did, look, he's a tough guy and he's very smart. And he did something that nobody was able to do. You know, you got to hand it to him. Any problem that you have with Turkey, I think I can solve. I mean, as long
Han prater om Iran, og så prater han om Tyrkia, og så prater han om Gaza. Altså, han sier så mye på en gang at det går ikke an å gjenta hva han sa.
Well, there you have it. President Trump answering questions for quite a bit of time this afternoon alongside Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel. Quite a bit of news that we got from the president just now. He said no pause on tariffs, but he's open to negotiations. The president said he wasn't considering a pause on his plan to implement sweeping additional tariffs on dozens of countries, despite outreach from trading partners eager to avoid the levies, while still signaling he would be open to some negotiations. Here's what he said. Quote, "We're not looking at that," Trump said on Monday while meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the Oval Office. He did say that tariffs were, quote, very important to his economic agenda and would generally remain, while opening the door to, quote, a fair deal and good deals with every country. For more, let's go to the White House, where we've got Tyler Kendall standing by of Bloomberg News. Tyler, quite a long time to hear from the president and Benjamin Netanyahu. Obviously, a lot of it dominated by questions regarding tariffs. The market looking for some reprieve, but did not seem like we're going to get any of that from this president. What did we learn on the tariff front?
Yeah, hey Tim. Well, at
Tror
this
du
point,
krypto
this
kom
White
i
House
dag,
really is holding
Johnny?
firm when it does come to the tariff negotiations. Importantly, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin
Jeg skal spørre
Netanyahu
meg.
said that Israel was ready to lower its own tariff barriers,
Ja,
something that the
la meg
country
gå
did ahead of
på
April
Skype,
2nd
2
in a
sekunder.
bid to try to front load against the tariffs, but was still slapped with that 17% levy that's still planning to go into effect on April 9th. But importantly, he said he added something else, that Israel is now committed to helping reduce the U.S.'s trade deficit with the country. We have learned that this is going to be an important prerequisite, it appears, when President Trump is striking deals to bring down the tariffs. President Trump told reporters last night that it's really trade imbalances. It's not necessarily the actual tariff levies that are imposed that need to start to be factored in to these conversations moving forward. For example, he singled out the European Union during those remarks, saying that perhaps energy could be a potential area where the EU could help to fix its the U.S.'s trade deficit with the trading bloc. We should note that the EU has previously floated that it would be open to boosting its own U.S. imports of LNG. Also, importantly, Tim, pretty big news today, President Trump doubling down on the idea that he is set to impose an additional 50% tariff when it comes to China. That is incredibly big news. Our understanding, according to the president, is that this tariff would be stacked on top of the existing 20% levy that's already been in place on China, and then the 34% levy that the White House had announced and is set to go into effect on April 9th later this week. So not appearing to back off of that threat as China vowed its own retaliation.
Jeg spurte hvilke betalingsløsninger som kom ut i dag.
Trump saying that China needs to drop that retaliatory
Holder
action
short
by
natten.
tomorrow
Nei, jeg
if
tror
they
nok
want
jeg
to avoid
tar
what could end up being an
tar
over
etterpå. Jeg skal se.
100% tariff on Chinese.
Yeah, tit for tat with one of the U.S.'s largest trading partners. That's not what
Ikke tør å være short natten.
investors want to see. Hey, before we let you go, there was other news that was made at this press conference from the Oval. It wasn't really a press conference, impromptu Q&A with the president and with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The president, Tyler, is saying that the U.S. is holding direct talks with Iran, and the next round will take place this Saturday. That's a really big deal.
A really big deal, Tim. In fact, Iran has
really
rebuffed this idea multiple times that it would engage directly with the U.S. Bloomberg News reporting just this morning that Iran had signaled it was ready to Oman-mediated talks, but not directly with the United States. In fact, Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson putting out a statement saying, quote, "Our proposal for indirect negotiations is a responsible, generous, and wise offer." That was before President Trump made his remarks, so we'll have to see if we get any other readout, but that was just this morning. So this is a really big development. President Trump also putting that timeline on it, as you noted, Saturday, rebuffing these reports that Iran is not ready for direct talk, saying that they will be together at the negotiating table to talk about the future of Iran's nuclear program. He was pressed on how the U.S. is going about trying to secure a deal that would be different from the JCPOA. President Trump said that he didn't have any firm details to give, but his hope is that it would be stronger. Of course, as you know, the U.S. Withdrew from the agreement in 2018. He did, though, say at the end there, Tim, that if talks aren't successful, it would be a, quote, very bad day for Iran, and Iran would be in great danger. He appeared not to rule out military action going forward.
Tyler Kendall from Bloomberg News live at the White House. Tyler, appreciate you keeping us up to date with everything we learned from the president just now. In the meantime, as the president was speaking alongside Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, we did see 4 o'clock come around, which meant the close of equity trading. Here for an update on everything happening after hours and how the markets closed, let's send things on over to Charlie.
All right, thank you very much, Tim and Emily. And here's what's going on. The Dow, the S&P, they did both close lower. What a day. Extreme volatility today. NASDAQ, though, had a gain after selling last week. We had NASDAQ today up 15 points, advancing by 0.1%, ending the session at 15,603. The NASDAQ 100 index up by 0.2%. The Russell 2000 index down 0.9%. In the end, after an awful lot of twists and turns, the S&P was down 11, ending the Monday session, a manic Monday, at 5,062, down 0.2%, while the Dow was down 349, down 0.9%. S&P today had a 7% intraday swing. 10-year at 4.19% with a 2-year 3.76%. Spot gold down $59 the ounce, down 2%, $29.78, and West Texas Intermediate crude down 1.5%, 61.08 for a barrel of WTI. Bitcoin right now down 0.4%, and Bitcoin with a $78,000 handle, 78,420 right now on Bitcoin. So again, recapping, it did turn out to be a down day for the S&P, down 0.2%. NASDAQ was up by 0.1%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Hey, thanks for that update, Charlie. Do appreciate it. Those numbers worth repeating. The S&P 500 down 0.2%. The NASDAQ composite up 0.1%. Well, the Dow fell more than 0.9%. The market chaos unleashed by Donald Trump's trade war continued for a third day as stocks, bonds, and commodities all swung wildly, buffeted by both fears of a recession and speculation the financial damage will drive him to change course. For more on the day's trade and also the big picture, let's bring in Cheryl Smith. She's an economist and portfolio manager at Trillium. Cheryl, good to have you with us this afternoon. I do want to say and thank you for your patience. We were supposed to speak with you many minutes ago, so we appreciate you standing by as we heard from the president. That's exactly where I want to start. The market pain, if you're along this market that we've seen, has been caused by concern around tariff policy. I think many people would argue this is self-inflicted. Do you think this continues, or do you think that the president will change course?
I think that this chaos that we're seeing is going to continue. For whatever reason, Trump likes
Oi, hun var ikke positiv, for å si det sånn.
chaos. He appears to think that it keeps people on their back foot and that he can gain some kind of advantage from it. So the tariff policy really couldn't have been constructed more perfectly to create tariff. He puts them on, he takes them off, he puts them on, he takes them off, and then there was a false rumor today that he was going to delay them by 90 days, where we got that 7% intraday swing in the S&P 500.
Fox News sier det selvfølgelig, men ingen andre. Det står ikke
Everyone is on tenterhooks.
Det står ikke på noen kalender at han skulle prate om det.
Everybody is following the news to try and figure this out. So I think we're going to continue to see this chaos for quite a long time.
Cheryl, what do you make of the upward move in Treasury yields today? I guess over the longer term, they have come down. That's something that President Trump has touted, that interest rates are falling. But what does it tell you on a day like today when equities are so volatile and yet we do have yields climbing pretty steadily, 10-year up 20 basis points just on the day? Yeah.
I think that what that tells us is that the Fed has pretty well signaled that they are not riding to the rescue. They are concerned about how the effect of these tariffs is going to play out for the U.S. economy, but they do not yet have the data to understand it at this point. So we had some comments from Powell on Friday. We had other comments today where they're saying, no, actually, he doesn't get to do this on tariffs and then have the Fed come and ride to the rescue and cut rates a lot more. And even if the Fed did start doing emergency cuts for rates, I actually think that would be an even worse signal. So I think we saw a bit of bond euphoria, if you will, or, you know, heading for the hills, just as a way of getting out of equities on Thursday and Friday. Treasuries were the easiest thing to buy. Probably some repositioning today.
I'm going to call you Dr. Smith because you have a PhD. You're an economist by training.
True.
Are you concerned?
Guilty as charged.
But it's good to have you talking to us about this because you have training in this. And I want to know if you think, from an economic policy perspective, what the economic consequences of this tariff policy could be on the U.S. economy.
I think the economic policy consequences can actually be quite dire. And I base that on the size of tariffs relative to the Smoot-Hawley tariffs of 1930, which many people quite credibly think prolonged, hastened, and deepened the Great Recession. And they set off, as we are seeing set off now, a round of competitive, they called them beggar thy neighbor policies of tariffs going one country, another country retaliating, and so forth, building up in the way that you're looking at China right now, with the United States putting on successive tariffs, China coming back and saying, well, they're going to restrict things, and Trump coming out today and saying, well, in that case, I'm going to raise you another 50 basis points. This is very destructive. And we have trade works under the economic concept is called comparative advantage, that we really do better if each country does things that it is best suited for by geography, by natural resources, by training of people to produce and then trade, so things are made most cheaply. We've seen a tremendous expansion of trade in the 20th and 21st century because of the fall in transportation costs that we've experienced. So we have a lot more trade going on now than we had in the 1930s when the Smoot-Hawley tariffs were put on. So I think this is really going to be a very, very difficult period of transition. And most importantly, this chaos and this uncertainty that he has created means that businesses and consumers really can't plan. So for consumers, I think they're going to increase their precautionary saving. They're going to say, maybe I'm going to put that off for now. I'm not going to buy that. I might need it later. Things could be getting a lot worse. That's bad. On the investment side, companies have no idea what they should do in terms of organizing their production. Now, if the production they're organizing were, let's say, a pizza parlor, it's easy enough. Do you buy a pizza oven or do you not buy a pizza oven? We're not talking pizza parlors. We're talking semiconductor factories. We're talking steel mills. We're talking major production plants. And any company has to look at this and say, how do I possibly make a decision about what the tariffs are going to be when I'm through making that investment, whether that is a year, 2 years, or 7 years down the way. So it's going to affect the amount of investment. That's going to have a significant effect on GDP growth. And I think we've increased the risk of recession dramatically over the past 4 days.
Oh, pretty heavy stuff. Cheryl, we appreciate you joining us. Cheryl Smith, economist and portfolio manager at Trillium, joining us from Cambridge, Massachusetts. Do appreciate you taking the time today. Well, we were hearing from Cheryl. We
Har du sett Frontbroker.com der, hvor fett det har blitt der? Hvis dere går på Frontbroker.com og sjekker nå, så gå på Frontbroker.com nå på forsida. Hvis dere gjør det jeg gjør da, så har dere Bloomberg oppe, trykker på Bloomberg, så har den oppe og surrer hele tida. Og så kan du gå ned på market screen her, trykker bare på pop-up, så er den oppe hele tida, da har du alle aksjene hele veien oppe.
Quote,
trykker sånn, har den på en screen,
Iranian
og så har du Frontbroker oppe på et sted, og så har du Walmart chart der, og så har du, det er flere da. Og så har du news på en annen vindu, og det som er kult på Frontbroker, så har du news fra alle. Du har news fra Forbes, du har news fra Investing, du har news fra CNBC, du har news fra alle på et sted. Det her blir oppdatert hele tiden. Så basically så kan du bare bruke Frontbroker.com til alt.
What exactly this all means. Needless to say, that was a pretty big surprise from the president. He had said he had made an overture to Iran seeking direct talks. Iran had rebuffed that overture. Earlier today, they said they had sent actually a counter-proposal to do indirect talks in Oman. And the strange thing about what the president said was, or sorry, with Oman as mediator, we don't know where those would have taken place. But the strange things that Trump said was, he said there's going to be a meeting this Saturday. It's going to be direct talks, and it's going to be almost at the highest level. He wouldn't say who that was with. So a lot of confusion over here. What does seem pretty much certain is that Iran has repeatedly rejected the idea of getting in a room directly with the U.S. They haven't done that for quite some time. So trying to parse the president's comments and figure out if there's some other way they could mean a potential indirect talks that don't
Microsoft kommer ned nå på etterhandelen.
I know you said that, you know, Bloomberg News is still trying to figure out exactly the details here, but give us an idea of what exactly would be going on in these talks.
Well, I mean, so the big issue, obviously, is Iran's nuclear program. Tehran has said for a long time that it does not want to build a nuclear weapon. And in fact, U.S. intelligence services have assessed that Iran is not actually looking to build a nuclear weapon. They have, however, enriched uranium pretty much to nuclear grade, and the suspicion is that if they wanted a nuclear weapon, it could be weeks, months to get one, so a very quick breakout time. I mean, the issue is that you had a deal that put limits on their nuclear program signed in 2015. President Trump abandoned that deal in his first term in 2018. Now he basically wants a second go-round, and it's very unclear what he wants. He has said repeatedly, the only thing we don't want is that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. That's the main thing. But he had also in the past criticized the previous deal because it didn't put a lot of limits on Iran's ballistic missile programs, its funding for proxies such as Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis. So, you know, the big question is, would he seek those concessions as well? So limits on ballistic missiles, limits on proxy funding, and that's going to be something that's going to be very hard to do. So we are by no means even close to the middle or the end of a process. The president thinks he can do this pretty quickly, but this is going to be a very, very long slog. It took a long time for the Obama administration to negotiate that previous deal.
Nick, why would Iranian officials push back on having direct talks?
You know, it's a great question, but it all sort of gets back to the history of this thing. I mean, I think essentially they want to have some distance between themselves and the U.S. They don't want to be put in a position where they feel like their interests could be compromised or undermined or misinterpreted. They want to do it. Just also shows the extreme degree of caution and just how slowly and deliberately they want to proceed on this thing. But it would also, potentially have immense blowback for Iranian leadership in Tehran. I mean, this is, the country where they call the U.S. the Great Satan, and a lot of the way that they proceed and pursue their national policies, their national security policies, but also their domestic policies against the hardliners is putting an enormous distance between themselves and the U.S. So you can imagine how severe the blowback might be, and then potentially how much the leadership might be undermined, especially from regular people who maybe want closer ties to the U.S. If you see an Iranian leader having a handshake with Donald Trump or some lower level, so that's just not an optic that they want to engage in.
Nick, we're gonna have to leave it there, and I know you have a lot of work to do today.
Ja, jeg bare tenker på bevegelsen, ikke sant? For det, hvis han har halvparten av det jeg har, vil han være dobbelt eksponert. Hvis han følger mine eksponering.
He joins us from our Washington, D.C. bureau. Well, the market chaos unleashed by Donald Trump's trade war continued for a third day as stocks, bonds, and commodities all swung wildly, buffeted by both fears of a recession and speculation that the financial damage will drive him to change course. He has not changed course. One person watching this closely is John Authers. He's a columnist for Bloomberg Opinion. He joins us here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. Hi. I want to get to your column, but before we do that, we got to talk about today. Because the volatility that we saw today, Emily did a great job explaining what happened. But
how, when,
det er ikke lov. Du kan gjøre når det er ferdig.
That it moved around a lot.
That moved everything. I mean,
I thought you meant on a personal level. I went to my desk, we were in the red. I came back, we were in the green.
No, that was not it. But just to remind everybody what happened, we fell as much as 4.71% on the S&P 500 in the morning, and then shot up to 3.4% higher on the S&P 500, only closed down to 0.1%.
And if you look at the NASDAQ 100, which is possibly the one where the action is greatest, the move, the range from bottom to top, was very irritatingly 9.98%.
You wanted to see 10.
Yes, I will double check my Excel.
Jeg fikk 66 000 bøter på denne.
There have only been 15 cases of a top going to 10% ever that I can discover.
Ja, jeg må det, herregud.
And none of those were during COVID, partly because circuit breakers were breaking in and the market just closed.
Nei, jeg begynner med det nå. Altså, jeg har trenet så litt
those
på
weren't moves that went from losses to gains. You're talking about just in general 10% moves.
In terms of
that's rare.
Men jeg begynner sånn smått.
I can remember, and I've been in this job far too long, but or doing this work for far too long. But the only day I can think of that really matches this is the Friday. So, Lehman goes down. 2 weeks later, Congress votes down TARP. Everybody gets scared. Friday, they finally do vote through TARP, but all confidence is gone, and it's the next week when you get a 20% fall in the S&P. It's one of these things people forget, that the Lehman shock actually took 3 weeks.
Nei, dette mye verre. Det var i fjor på den ene dagen når det knalt. Da var det ned opp og ned med 1000 poeng. I dag var det mye mer.
The Dow, from memory, was down and up more than 1,000 points during the course of the day.
Jeg har aldri sett det selv. Ikke børskrakk i 2008
and it ended up roughly where it had started. Which, when I ran the numbers that time, was, as far as I can make out, the most volatile day.
Bare så i stad. Jeg har ikke tørt å trene med store posisjoner i dag. Du får jo plutselig 200 poeng i trynet på 1 minutt.
The following Monday, when people got in, that was the first big bounce day. Something like 8, 9, 10% up on the S&P. So the absolute Wile E. Coyote.
Ja, det tok jo en stund da. Det var som du sa, det sperret jo alle blokkene. Det var ikke bare det. Det sperret mange. Og så kom det melding på at beklager, du får ikke lov å åpne transaksjoner. Det er sikkert for å redde husene og kundene.
So, although it wasn't unidirectional anymore, we did have 2 or 3 more really horrible falls. You had the rescue of Citi, you had the rescue of B of A. There were a number more scary things to happen before the fear had taken over completely. Greed was gone, and we were ready to bounce back. So that's the positive and the negative. There's no particular reason from this amount of volatility to think that things are going to calm down. There probably is a good reason to think that the precipitate fall from a great height, Wiley is over.
So why are we seeing this historic volatility? Is there something underpinning, the market of 2025 versus all the market solves that we've seen in history that makes this time different? I'm thinking the growth of passive indexing, the use of algorithms now in trading. Like, is there something in the plumbing that's making this just so much more volatile?
Hvis du har 10 000 og jeg har 20 000, så har du like stor risiko som meg. Det vil si du har dobbelt som er utsatt. Så hvis jeg tjener 10 000, så tjener du 10 000. Hvis jeg sitter i minus med 10 000, så sitter du minus med 10 000. I og med at jeg har 20 000, så går du drawdown. Da er du borte. Så da må du skrive 50% for eksempel, ikke 1 til 1. Hvis det gir mening. Hvis det gir mening.
Breakdown ETFs. I still cannot, for the
life
understand the point of having a single stock ETF.
So you can lever up, John.
Yes, which I don't think is a good idea.
You don't want to leverage your micro-strategy bet?
No.
I mean strategy?
No, I've got kids. I want to go through college. I want to have a happy retirement. I'm not prepared to take that risk. But and passive investing has obviously had a huge impact, and I'm sure those changes in the market plumbing have had an effect on the distribution of these losses. So it's noticeable the Mag 7 have completely parted company today. Nvidia's had a nice bounce, and Apple is continuing to fall into the abyss.
Du tror markedet skal fortsette å falle nå da, på Bloomberg?
But in general, the growth of indexing means
that the
really big companies that by necessity are a large chunk of the indexes get it in the neck when you're going down. Just
Nei, har du tatt 50, Robert? For da slipper du, da det basically likt som meg.
So the column that you wrote, or I shouldn't say that you wrote, it was published at 1 a.m. You probably finished it maybe. I'm just trying to get an idea of what you were looking at when you wrote this. Was it Friday or was it futures?
It was okay. Both. I'd written most of the charts during the day. This is one of the great things about I write on Sundays for Mondays, and one of the big advantages of that is that you actually have a fixed target to aim at.
Okay.
When you're covering markets, they're not going to move on you. So I had a lot of fun trying to get my arms around what the hell had happened.
The reason I ask is because you argue there's no sign that markets have had enough yet. Is there a sign after today's trade?
That was 24 hours ago.
Exactly. Is there a sign after today's trade that they've had enough?
Some signs thereof. The dollar has recovered a little bit again today. I'm not saying it's a huge change. What's happened in bonds is extraordinary given what's happening in stocks.
Yeah. Emily was saying that.
That is what worries me because, I mean, you had Torsten on earlier, Torsten Slok earlier at Slurk, however one pronounces. Very nice guy, very good economist, as we all know, making the point that if the dollar is strengthening and people are selling treasuries to that extent, it must be Americans selling treasuries. So I guess the big concern now, why would you sell treasuries in those kinds of numbers? There's got to be a risk that somebody's in trouble, and that's got to be the next concern. Ever since LTCM,
long-term capital management,
which unfortunately I'm old enough to remember, 1998, which nearly on its own wiped out the market. It was just a hugely levered hedge fund that got into trouble. There is every market break there has been concern that there's going to be another LTCM, and with the possible exception of a few hedge funds getting into trouble early in the financial crisis, that hasn't happened. That dog hasn't barked. It's one of the reasons, there was this terrible scare after the Brexit referendum, and then after a few days you worked out actually nobody was so exposed to the pound that they're going to go under, that there are no margin calls happening, we can go back in the water. That's one of the most, in some ways that's one of the most similar events to what we've just had, is just a country suddenly does something really remarkable and people have to react to it. Thankfully, it was just Little Britain rather than the US doing that one as well. Is it possible that there is an accident out there? I don't know, and given what I do for a living, I probably would have heard some gossip about who it was if somebody was in trouble by now, even if I wouldn't mention their name on air.
Off air, you tell us.
But yeah, and nobody is. You kind of recognize the noise of these things.
Right.
I'm not getting that kind of noise.
Right.
I cannot. Somebody somewhere, for reasons that didn't really have to do with what was happening in their stock portfolio, sold an awful lot of treasuries today, and I'd like to know why, but it's unlikely that was because they just thought, well, that's a fantastic deal. I can maximize my profits and put money to work.
All right.
It smells
maybe
of something
a preview
worse than that.
of a later column. John Author is columnist for Bloomberg Opinion, joining us here in the studio. The market down 0.2% on the S&P 500, up 0.1% on the Nasdaq.
Hva mener du, Robert Ines? Jeg skjønte ikke. Så du må søke på meg.
It's 4:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. It turned out to be another down day for the S&P 500 index. A lot of volatility, big swings for the U.S. stock market. The S&P at one point managed to swing 7% from high to low, ending the session down 11 at 5,062 on the S&P. That was a drop today of 0.2%. The Dow down 349. Dow Jones Industrial Average down 0.9%. NASDAQ had an up day today, picking up 0.1%, while the NASDAQ 100 index was up 0.2%. The Russell 2000 index down 0.9%. The VIX now at 47. 10-year yield 4.20% with a 2-year 3.78%. Spot gold down $53 the ounce right now at $29.84. That is a drop of 1.8%. Spot gold, by the way, falling below $3,000. West Texas Intermediate crude 61.01 a barrel, down 1.7%, and Bitcoin up 0.1% right now, 78,879 on Bitcoin. Bottom line, a lot of volatility, all about tariffs. Cheryl Smith is economist and portfolio manager at Trillium, and she was a guest right here on Bloomberg Business Week Daily.
I think that this chaos that we're seeing is going to continue. For whatever reason, Trump likes to work in chaos. He appears to think that it keeps people on their back foot and that he can gain some kind of advantage from it.
Cheryl Smith, economist and portfolio manager at Trillium, interviewed right here on Bloomberg Business Week Daily. Friday, we hear from JP Morgan Chase. Bank stocks all advanced today. Many of them advanced, I should say. JPM up 2% today. Wells Fargo also on Friday, up by 2%. Citigroup, Bank of America next week. We got Citigroup up 1.2% today. Bank of America rallied 3.5%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Hey, thanks so much for that update, Charlie. Do appreciate it. Well, it is today's big take. It's also one of the most read stories on the Bloomberg terminal. The cross-asset team spent all weekend working on it. It's about how Wall Street is just collateral damage in Trump's trade war. Bloomberg News cross-asset reporter Isabel Lee is part of the team that worked on the story. She joins us here in the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. Isabel, congratulations on this story. I know a lot of work went into it. I just want to start big picture. The investor class, it was a class that I think was served well under the first Trump administration. It was optimistic that it would see the same this administration, and it's not at all happening.
Yes, exactly. We actually missed Emily. If Emily was around, she would have been part of this story. But
she was on vacation.
Emily and I were our seatmates, and I bug her way more than I should have. But so exactly, and this is what you call the wealth effect. You know, the past 2 years, investors were all feeling flush. You would check your 401k every single day because markets were up. It's up 20% for back-to-back 2 years. And then now, please don't check your 401k because we're seeing the reverse wealth effect. And a lot of the people that we talked to over the weekend were saying that this has real implications. It will ripple throughout the economy because if you see your stocks or whatever your investments edging lower, it will really impact how you behave. You won't spend enough. Maybe you'll hold off from that appliance. You'll hold off from that vacation. And companies will also maybe lower their capex. And at the same time, there could be an argument that, you know, only 50% of Americans own stocks, but that's still half of the country. And for those average Americans, their portfolios on average are just around, their retirement especially, around 200,000+. There was a study on that. And 20% of that is still significant. It's 40,000. And that is your entire nest egg. We're not even talking about billionaires like Elon Musk. It's the normal average American. So it affects you.
What was the general vibe of the portfolio managers, hedge fund investors that you spoke to over the weekend? Were they
Oslo Børs I morgen kan gå begge veier. Kommer til å litt av på AC natt. Men jeg har kjøpt masse dag da.
Definitely angry, definitely frustrated. And one, Jay Hatfield, CEO of Infrastructure Capital, was saying actually that he wasn't that much frustrated with Trump. It was more Scott Bessent because they were expecting more from him, given that, you know, he came from the industry. But some were also really shocked because I think this was above what a lot of people expected. This was so-called worse than what they expected. And then what do? They say you get over it and then you adjust your portfolio.
In terms of assets that the president watches, we know he used to like to talk about the Dow and the S&P 500 and equity market records. You and the team write about different assets that he's got his eye on. Bonds, especially or treasuries, I should say, and then also on commodities.
Yes, there's that. And actually, that's new, because usually before it was just the Dow that he was really looking at, and there were reports over the weekend that even Fox News removed the Dow ticker, which was a first in history. I read that, but I need to fact check, so I probably shouldn't have shared it. But it's out there. But now Trump is also looking at 10-year treasuries and oil. So as stocks created, those also moved violently. They sank, basically. And he's also looking at that. But we also have him saying that the patient has to live. You know, this is short-term pain. But you can interpret that phrase in many different ways.
Isabel, you've done a lot of work over the years about the wealth effect and how it's this idea that when the stock market goes up, people see that their portfolios are doing well, so they feel good, and then they go out and spend. And you wrote in this piece, the rich who own most of the shares, most of the stocks, that 10% class that you mentioned, Tim, also account for roughly half of the country's consumer spending. And I thought that was really interesting, that like these people that wanted Trump in office because he would support Wall Street also are a big part of consumption, and now I guess the economy's getting a double whammy.
Exactly. I mean, not to get into politics, also I can't vote. I always tell Emily that. But it's interesting because these people are the ones who are driving much of the consumer spending. I mean, maybe the average American, they're finding it tough. Every time I go to the grocery, I'm just shocked at my bill. But the rich people still buy. I mean, they still buy jewelry, they still buy gold. You see them still buying Lambo, which is like a joke we say in the crypto world. But they're still out there spending. But maybe after this weekend, they may not. But yes, you're right. America is largely a consumer-driven economy. And one can't really doubt whether, like, I feel like you can't ignore this anymore. They will be affected, no matter how rich you are, probably. Or, I mean, maybe I wouldn't know.
Isabel Lee, Bloomberg News cross-asset reporter. Always great when you join us. Check out her story. It's among the most read on the Bloomberg terminal. It is today's big take. Wall Street is just collateral damage in Trump's trade war. Well, let's take a look at some stocks on the move today. We've got with us Bloomberg News cross-asset reporter Emily Grafeo. She's also my co-host for the day. She's working double duty here.
I am, but
I hope you had time while you were hosting the show to find some stocks that were moving.
yes, there was. My terminal is very helpful. I get a lot of data through the Bloomberg.
Highly recommend the Bloomberg terminal.
Highly recommend, because you can really see what is moving. One of those was Dollar Tree. It was actually one of the best performers. I'm going to pull it up in the S&P 500 on the day. They got an upgrade over at Citi from buy to neutral. The analysts over there are saying that they anticipate higher across-the-board tariffs will be positive for the discount retailer, and they see prices moving from $125 to $150 or $175. That seems inevitable, but they expect consumers will be accepting of this magnitude of change. So we just heard from Isabel Lee about the richest people in America buying and maybe, pinching pennies a little bit more on their luxury purchases because now the stock market is down so much. But also in, Dollar Tree, we're potentially anticipating consumers, I guess here in this end of the spectrum, absorbing cost increases because they're so small.
Okay, Dollar Tree, certainly on your radar. Another stock moving today.
Stellantis as well, the Jeep maker. They're willing to help suppliers pay tariff costs to withstand the initial shock of the trade war. This was not good for ADRs of Stellantis, though. We saw that stock drop about 6%. This is a European automaker. So initially, I honestly saw the company moving, and I thought, maybe it'll be higher because people are trying to buy Europe. But overall, it was really just a global sell-off.
Autos, last one. We got 30 seconds for
AppLovin. This stock was up in the green today. We had a report from CNBC that they're going to merge itself with the U.S. subsidiary and eventually the global business of TikTok. And Bloomberg Intelligence said that would help the advertising tech firm accelerate its reach beyond video game clientele and into e-commerce. Of course, TikTok, really big there on e-commerce. So keeping an eye on AppLovin, Tim.
Okay, a volatile day. 3 stocks that made big moves. Emily Grafeo, thank you so much for the update. That's Bloomberg News cross-asset reporter Emily Griffeo. For more conversations like this, listen to our new Stock Movers podcast. Subscribe for 5-minute episodes on the biggest winners and losers in the stock market. Listen to Stock Movers on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcasts. Taking a look at how the broader indices closed out the day, a reminder that it was a volatile day, but the S&P 500 fell only 0.2%. That is going to do it for this edition of Bloomberg Business Week Daily. A big thank you to Emily Griffeo for filling in for Carol Massar. We now go to our colleagues in Washington for Bloomberg Balance of Power, and Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lyons bringing you an exclusive interview with Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren. Let's listen.
Congress's answer to the tariffs.
Well, let's back up just a little bit. As you've been reporting all day long, every light is flashing red in terms of the economy, and that we really are on the precipice of sliding into a recession and maybe taking it worldwide. Meanwhile, the Secretary of the Treasury is going on Tucker Carlson to talk about all of the workers that Trump and Doge have illegally fired, and spin some tale about how all those people from the Veterans Administration or the NIH or the Social Security Administration can go work in these factories that will magically appear. We need a Secretary of the Treasury who's in the real world, and in the real world right now, he should be calling a meeting of FSOC. Remember, the Financial Stability Oversight Council, which is what we put in place after the crash in 2008. And this is the way that government, when the economy is doing what it's doing right now, the Secretary of the Treasury is supposed to pull everyone together and actually figure out a plan, call the plan, and then execute on the play. But that is not what our Secretary of the Treasury is doing. So that puts us in a position where Congress needs to act, and Congress can actually do it using the authority that Donald Trump himself is using. He's using something called IEPA, but the point is that if Congress says, no, there is no emergency here, then Donald Trump loses his ability to put all of these tariffs in place. So we need to act. We need a Secretary of Treasury to do his job. The Democrats in Congress are ready to act. But if the Secretary of Treasury won't act, then we need the Republicans to step up, join the Democrats, and put a halt to these tariffs that are truly wrecking the worldwide economy.
Well, Senator, the president argues it's going to help the U.S. economy, that this is actually about bringing manufacturing back to the U.S., protecting American workers, and lowering trade deficits with other countries. Is there something fundamentally wrong with that objective, or it's simply the means that you take issue with?
The objective is exactly one that I have advanced for years. Of course, tariffs should be one of our tools in the toolbox of economic policy. And there are times when appropriately executed that we could use a tariff, for example, to onshore a specific supply chain or to help build up manufacturing that we want to have here in the United States. But you do that in a thoughtful, integrated way, instead of a haphazard number around tariffs applied to everyone with no thought at all about whether or not those tariffs will actually have a negative impact on manufacturing that's currently going on or any manufacturing that anybody might try to get underway. Instead of actually supporting manufacturing and good jobs, the way Donald Trump has done this has been to scare off anybody from investing here in the United States in any kind of facility that takes years to be able to build and expand and get it going. He's forcing people to pull back. That is not good for American workers. It is not good for building jobs here in America. It is not good for onshoring our manufacturing. You need a thoughtful policy, and that is the opposite of what Donald Trump has offered.
You heard from Larry Fink today, Senator. Blackstone CEO, BlackRock CEO, says he believes that a recession is already underway, that the CEOs he talks to say the same thing. Do you agree, and should the Federal Reserve announce an emergency rate cut tonight?
Look, I am really worried about whether we are already in a recession or just right on the edge. All of the lights are flashing red. And Larry Fink points this out, but he is not the only one. There are a lot of folks who are starting to say this, and a lot of evidence in that direction. Where our focus should be right now is on preventing it from getting any worse. And we can do that. You know, this isn't some outside shock. This is not some war in some distant land that's caused this problem. This is not that the markets are imploding because suddenly all of the bad mortgages are coming to light, like in 2008. One person has started the dumbest trade war in the history of America. Congress has the power to rein that back in. And if Donald Trump and his team won't do it, then Congress should step up and do it before more damage is done.
Well, does one person also have the power to provide a check on that damage? To get back to Joe's question, Senator, even if the Fed were to issue an emergency rate cut, would that be enough to stem all of the bleeding that you think could be happening in the U.S. economy as a result of these policies?
Look, the Fed chair himself on Friday just said that he is concerned that this haphazard tariff announcement is going to drive up inflation and drive up unemployment simultaneously. You know, I understand why the Fed chair is really worried at this moment. The one person who can stop this problem is Donald Trump. And if he will roll back these tariffs, we can at least stop the damage from continuing to bleed out through our economy and around the world. And if Trump won't do it, then we just need some Republicans in the House and the Senate to grow a backbone and do what they know is right. You know, I don't know anybody in Congress who's saying, man, this is a great idea. What a cool move. They are really worried about what's happening. They're hearing it from their own constituents at home. But they have the power to fix it. So let's put the pressure on those Republicans to join with the Democrats and take away the authority from Donald Trump to be able to continue to roll out a tariff policy that has the potential now to put millions of people out of work, cost millions of people their savings, their retirement, and start shutting down businesses throughout this country.
Looking at a letter that you sent, in fact, led senators signed by all 11 Democrats on the banking committee. It's to the chairman, Tim Scott, demanding a hearing on the impact of President Trump's trade war. I mention this because you're going to be involved in a hearing tomorrow, Senate Finance Committee, with the U.S. Trade Representative, Jamieson Greer, who I can't imagine realized the timing of this hearing when your invitation first went out. Is that the person you want to talk to? Who else would you bring before the banking committee, if not the president himself?
You bet. I am ready to talk to Mr. Greer tomorrow about
Dere tester ut Discorden første gang I dag med OBS og sånn.
What we can do to try to rescue this
Ja, men det ikke noe lyd. Ingen som hører om noen ting.
In a recession. I want to ask
Mr.
Jamieson, and I'm going to ask him what it's going to take him to step up and tell the president to stop
device. Der det Game Capture HD6, Microphone, Yeti, Default Game Capture. Det Yeti da sikkert, for den jeg bruker.
Well, I wonder then, Senator, how much authority you really think the U.S. Trade Representative has, or how much sway in impacting the president's decisions? I could ask the same about the Secretary of the Treasury, of the Commerce Department, of others for that matter.
I hope you're listening to your own question, and that is, these are the very people that Donald Trump said were the best people to do policy in each of their chosen areas. Donald Trump's the one who chose his trade rep. Donald Trump
jeg visste ikke at jeg skulle gå live I dag, for plutselig så funket plutselig så fikk vi betalingsløsninger alt I dag, så jeg visste ikke at du kunne gå live I dag. Så det var litt sånn brått på meg. Men vi bare det live på Discord nå? Jo, nå har lyden på Discord nå funker. Konge.
To rescue this economy.
Men skulle du ta en tur bort på morgen, eller?
That's what the FSOC, the Financial Stability Oversight Council, was
Hvis du ringer meg på
deliberately
formiddagen,
built
ring på
for.
formiddagen,
And that is
så
the job that was given to
tar
the
vi oss og får
Secretary
satt opp
of
ordentlig.
Treasury. Step up and do your job.
Ja.
And if Donald Trump has any, Donald Trump should listen to his Secretary of Treasury if his Secretary of
Vi kan
Treasury
ta dem
will
sammen i
do
morgen.
his job. That is the question. And if none of them will do their jobs, Congress needs to do its job and take away this authority from Donald Trump. And I just want to be clear, we're running out of time on this. Every single day that goes by, every hour that people are saying, I'm not investing
Vi
here,
tar med han i
I'm
morgen,
laying
når du
off
kommer på morgen, så ringer vi sammen.
every single minute, it gets more
Kan,
and more
greit det.
dangerous for our economy and for the worldwide
Maser ikke.
economy.
Det går
It is
fint.
time for the Secretary of the Treasury to do his job. It is time for the President to do
Det vil
his
han.
job. And it is time for Congress to do its job.
All right, Senator, we will leave it on that note. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts joining us here on Balance of Power. Now, as we consider how the president's policies are influencing financial markets, we want to take you through the whipsawing action we saw today and turn to our colleague, Romaine Bostick, who is joining us from New York. So, Romaine, for all of the incredible swings, we actually ended up not that much down on the day.
Yeah, it's really not about where we close or even where we open, Kaylee, but kind of what happened in between. The S&P only closed lower by about 0.2%. You compare that to the 5% drops that we had the last couple of days, that may not seem as much. But from peak to trough, meaning the lowest point of the day in the S&P to the highest point of the day in the S&P, we had an 8.5 percentage point swing. That's the second widest swing that we've had on the S&P on a percentage point basis since at least the global financial crisis. On a points basis, there's been no day where we saw that type of swing. And I think it gets to this idea, Kaylee, of kind of what I think Elizabeth Warren was touching on. This idea of sort of what is the response to the response. Is it Congress? Is it Scott Bessent, some of the other folks in the White House? This is what the market was really trying to suss out. One of the reasons why you got that swing, Kaylee, was right around 10 a.m. this morning, Washington time. There was a tweet that went out, a social media post that seemed to suggest that the president was willing to grant a 90-day reprieve on these tariffs. Now, the White House came out very quickly and said the president did not say that. This is coming from a fraudulent source. Nevertheless, the market really took off on that. And it gives you a sense here of where sentiment is at. The market does not like this. You see on your screen there, Kimball Musk does not like this. This is the younger brother of Elon Musk. He sits on the board of Tesla as well as some of the other Elon Musk enterprises here, making it clear he's also against the tariffs. And I think you're getting to the point now where some people are starting to say the quiet part out loud, whether it's Druckenmiller, whether it's Jamie Dimon, whether it's Larry Fink. A lot of big heavyweights out there are now finally speaking up and saying what I think a lot of us know, that at least right now in the interim, they're not comfortable with this. I guess the question, Joe and Keeley, becomes whether the market can find some comfort with this, precisely because the president seems to suggest that these tariffs aren't going away anytime soon.
Da takker for alle som følger
Elon
med
himself
deg.
isn't
Det
a
vil
fan
også
either.
morgen. Kommer til å være på hele tiden.
You know, it's
Still
something though,
spørsmål
going
vil,
through what
akkurat hva dere vil.
we saw
Alt
this morning, it
live,
makes you wonder
alt
if this
på plass.
market is a coiled spring,
Putt på
if it's
penger i
just
morgen,
waiting for
da vinner
good
man konto
news
på 20
to start
000.
rallying. But as soon as I say that, you're looking at a VIX
Så skal vi bygge
that's
det opp
sitting right
og
under
tjene penger.
47. How do we rationalize it?
You rationalize that by saying no, it's not
Natta,
necessarily
Robert.
the
Jeg går litt
coiled
live
spring.
på
There are
TikTok
people
nå,
in there
bare for
willing
å
to buy,
prate.
Joe, but a VIX
For
elevated
snacks i
like
morgen.
this is
Og for
unusual
alle
for it to
som
stay
følger meg
elevated. You
og
get
er
big
med på dette.
spikes,
Det blir-
and then it typically
det blir
reverts
action.
to the mean. That's not